us, and I know it's dark in here, but I wanted to talk about my psych ward stay that I had in June, late June to early July of 2018. So this will probably be a triggering topic, so just warnings for like drugging, dissociative fugue, and anything like that. Just a overall warning for that. So obviously what happened that got me locked up is actually kind of embarrassing and one of the things I wish I could undo. But I had an episode that started at home. It started with a headache, like the worst headache of my life, probably. And I was convinced that my father had murdered my family and that he had been raping me since I was a kid. That was what I had believed at the time that caused me to walk out of my house and, like, walk to the hospital. Which I was going to the right place. But, I had passed out several times on the way there, like passing out in random people's yards, and eventually hitched a ride with some guy, which is very dangerous, obviously. But I did, and he did take me to the ER where they thought I was on drugs. So they did drug tests and all this stuff. They did a rape kit, which was embarrassing, of course. And then around several hours later, like a 48-hour hold, I was held there for 48 hours or so. I went to the Psych hospital, which they transferred me to through this underground tunnel, which goes between the different hospitals. And I had a very high heart rate, which they couldn't explain. They found it weird. My heart rate was 200, resting like I was laying down with a heart rate of like 202. Resting like laying down. I wasn't up and about like exercising or doing anything that would explain it. So I had that, and then I think the night of, I got put on drugs. I got put on Risperdal, which is an antipsychotic, which I guess they thought I was psychotic because I said I was hearing voices, which I was. They were all internal. During all this, like, I was seeing things. Like, I was seeing flashes of all these children being raped. Like, I wasn't being raped, but all these other children were being raped, like, around me. Like, I was watching these kids be sexually assaulted. And obviously that wasn't real. At least I don't think it was. I don't know where I would have been able to go to see children getting touched in that way. So, I stayed there for 2 weeks, and during my 2 weeks, we would do group therapy about 7 times a day. And they threw every diagnosis they could at me. They threw schizophrenia at me a few times. They threw psychosis NOS at me. They threw BPD at me, which the BPD was like the least, like, it didn't fit anything. Like, if when you say you're hearing voices, they're like, schizophrenia, there you go. But no, and then once I got out, I was really messed up. I was like doped up on this Risperdal. I had really bad akathisia. Like, I was up moving around all the time. I couldn't shower for more than like 80 seconds at a time. And I couldn't watch anything that I liked to do. Like, I liked cartoons, I liked listening to music. I couldn't do any of that because of this drug. It took me about 2 weeks to get off of it, maybe 4. And it took me about a year to sleep in my own bed again and, like, not sleep upstairs on the floor. And it took me about a year to, like, not have the akathisia anymore. Like, if, like, a year ago I wouldn't have been able to make this video. Well, 2 years ago, pretty much. But 2 years ago I wouldn't be able to make this video because I wouldn't be able to sit still. And my mom was really mad at the psych ward for how they handled everything and how doped up I was on this drug. Because, like, everyone was on Risperdal. Like, I guess that's the standard now, to give everyone an antipsychotic. Even if they don't need the antipsychotic, they're on the antipsychotic for whatever reason, to keep them docile, to keep them calm. Like, I swear, if someone asked to, like, murder me, I probably would have complied on that drug. And I had a couple friends there, I guess people that tolerated me, because I was an adult at the time, so it was people between the ages of 18 and, 80. There's, like, a really elderly woman there who was just there because she wouldn't take her pills, like her medicine, so they put her in a psych ward. And then there was, like, people around 20, 21 years old. I was 19 at the time. And like my mom mentioned dissociative disorders, and they were like so like triggered. Like I don't know how else to describe it. This social worker was fucking triggered at the mention of dissociative disorder. She's like, no, rare. She didn't say don't exist. She said rare. And she pretty much was disputing the existence of it. She's like, they either don't exist or they're rare. And I'm like, this is why people with DID and dissociative disorders do not do good on like psych wards at all, unless they're like trauma based. Like if you want to go to a hospital if you have a dissociative disorder, you should probably go to a trauma hospital, a hospital that specializes in those types of things, because you're going to be mistreated or treated bad. Because I was told by a nurse, this is the most oddest thing I've ever heard from anybody, but I was crying because of this drug I was on. I couldn't cry at all. And she's like, you look like you're trying to make people feel sorry for you. And I was like, what? I literally can't cry, lady. I just want to cry. And she's like, you're trying to make people feel sorry for you. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I get why they, like, won't touch you or hug you or offer you any form of compassion because you're not supposed to touch the patients or whatever like that. But still, like, that's hateful. Then I was accused of holding my breath because my heart rate was too high. And I'm thinking, maybe you should find out why my heart rate is too high. Like, find out. Like, find a medical decision. Because eventually my mom was so scared by how high the heart rate was, even after I'd been there for, like, a week, that she kind of, like, bullied them. Like, they would talk about how much anxiety, I guess, my mother caused the ward staff. So eventually they did do all these medical tests. They did an EKG, a chest x-ray, and they found nothing wrong. But then they never explained the heavy heart rate. Like, I don't know if a high heart rate is a part of a dissociative episode or not, because no one ever explained anything to me. Like, having a heart rate of 200 would offer some sort of, physical explanation for my episode, perhaps, but it never did. Because I've heard people say a fugue state, like where you like leave the house, which is a fugue state, and you don't really remember. Like, I don't remember. I was told that I had said all this stuff, which I remember some of the stuff I was saying. But they're like, you said your uncle raped you. I'm like, no, I accused my dad of raping me. I did not accuse my uncle. And, like, my brain was, like, so, like, flustered. Like, I had a really bad headache. Like, once I got on the ward, my headache kind of changed from what it was to where it was burning, and it would go back and forth between each side of my head, kind of like a hot flash, I guess, is what people have described it as. Kind of like that. When I describe it, they're like, you mean hot flashes? And I'm like, no, it's a headache. But it was like back and forth across the sides of my brain. Like left side of my head, right side of my head. Back and forth burning sensation. And it really hurt. And eventually they did give me painkillers. And then the Risperdal caused me to, just, have all this pain. Like these cramps. I had these cramps and they were really, really bad. And I would cry at night, and the patients next door would go, oh my god, shut the fuck up. And I'm like, the patients were really vile towards me. Like, whenever there was a new person, they were very apprehensive and hateful towards the newbie. But once you're here for a while, they're like, there you are, that person's there. But when you're like new, they're like, fuck you. Type of people. And there were those people who I guess had some sort of severe, like, delusional disorder. Like, they would call you a bitch and like a bastard and like say, you're the devil. And that was my father's main concern, that I'm gonna be around people who are crazier than me. Which deep down, I don't really remember a lot of the psych ward now that it's been like 2 years. But I remember that my mom brought me in some Harry Potter books to read, which I of course didn't read. I wasn't allowed a picture of my cat, which really made my mom upset for some reason. I mean, I understand, like, I forgot my cat died, to be honest. Like, did my cat really die? And she's like, yeah, she's dead, honey. I'm like, oh. So mom was trying to bring me a picture of her, and they would not allow that one bit. They were so apprehensive against that. So eventually my mom didn't do it. She wasn't allowed to have a phone back there, and dad's like, so we can't record the abuse, is what they're trying to say. They act like it's a patient protection thing. But no, they don't want you to record all the malpractice and abuse they're doing. Like, as soon as I was on the ward, I was diagnosed with BPD. Basically, as soon as I was on the ward. Everyone was diagnosed with fucking BPD. And I'm sure, I know BPD is pretty common personality disorder. But not everyone on the ward has BPD. I wouldn't even think, I don't think I can think of, like, in terms of hospitalization, I don't think BPD would come up as one of the main things someone would be hospitalized for. And, like, everyone had it, like, they wouldn't even talk about your diagnosis with you. They just handed you a book and go, you're borderline, here you go. Like, my mom's borderline, like, very borderline. Like, I could do, like, a 40-minute video about how borderline she is. I actually have one. It's called My Trauma Story, or I mention a lot of her in that video. It's just called My Overall Trauma. But there's a video of her where I talk about how, like, borderline she is. And they would go on and on and on, like the doctor. I saw the doctor, like, once a week. I saw her, like, twice throughout my entire stay. The rest of the stay, I saw a nurse practitioner, and she was very transphobic. She's like, well, if you have a vagina, I'm going to call you she just because you have a vagina. And I was like, what? I mean, yeah, but you don't have to be a dick. Like, you can believe whatever you want, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. You could have called me by my preferred name. You didn't have to be a dick about it. And she, like, asked me everything, because, like, I learned, the routine pretty quickly. Like, if you say you're hearing voices, or you say you're having bad thoughts, you're gonna stay longer. That's just the gist of it. You need to learn to lie. Especially when you're in a bad ward. Like, if your ward's bad, you're gonna lie. You're gonna lie to get out of there. And which is what I learned other people were lying to get out of there. Because I stayed for 2 weeks my episode, what I said was pretty extreme. But the stay that they predicted I would have would be a 48-hour stay. I stayed there for about 300 or so hours. So, like, 14 days, I guess. And I was supposed to only stay for 48 hours. But I was there for, like I said, 2 weeks. I was there from July 20 to June 24th to, like, the 2nd of July. I got out just before the 4th of July. And I was there for, like, ever for this minor episode. And we would never, ever, like, talk about what led us to getting there. Like, we just have group therapy. Would never talk about our individual issues. It was just group 7 times a day, pretty much, and then, like, a snack afterwards. But, like, why would you have an individual therapy? Like, why wouldn't you talk about your issues that led you to where you are? Like, it didn't seem very hard for that to be a thing. Like, why can't they have individual therapy? There's, like, maybe 10 people on the ward at a time, 40 minutes per person a day. That doesn't sound like too much to ask on top of the group therapy, but we never got individual time just to talk to these, like, therapists, and they were very shitty social workers. The only thing the therapist got right was she said I had an abnormal attachment to my parents, which I didn't get at the time, which I think she means disorganized attachment, which I can see with my mom, not so much with my dad. I think the attachment with my dad is fine, but, like, they were so hateful and vile, and they would say hateful and vile things. And she tried to say that my transgenderism is because of my attachment to my father, and I'm like, that was, like, the worst. Like, it was my only experience with the psych ward, but it was the worst. It was 2 weeks of utter hell. And even after I got home, like, the weirdest thing is when I got home, I would cry about wanting to go home, even though I was home. I would cry about wanting to be home. I want to go home, but I was literally home, which was a weird, like, I guess, side effect of the experience, was I would cry that I want to go home. Even after I was out for a month or two, I would cry, I want to go home, I want to go home, but I was home, which was a weird experience for me. And, that's what happens when you have something that people don't believe in. Like, I pretty much don't, like, call anyone out for faking anymore, or try to say someone's faking me, because, like, why would I do that? Psychiatrists already think it's fake to begin with, so what's the point of me making it worse by doing that? That's just making it worse. So yeah, I rambled really long, but that's the best I can do in terms of, like, explaining things for my brain.